So again, this is about the contract development and how you deal with it in the Grants Gateway. So this is not going to be precisely exactly everything you need to do for your specific grant, but it'll get you there to know where you need to be, what each page does, and what each function does. So first, I would just want to let you know what has been kind of happening behind the scenes since your contract was awarded. So you received an award letter, and the state agency staff had to develop contract parameters. For instance, is there a advance or not an advance? In your case, they're all requested 25% advances, so you could request an advance. They have to set all those details up in the system in the back end before they get the contracts over to you. The contract details are updated and reviewed. So in your cases, the majority of it is the budget and the work plan. And in your case, the work plan is being entered on your behalf by your program manager. So you'll have the budget to enter. So that's this contract details updated and reviewed. So there's going to be some back and forth in that part, the second button here, because it was updated by the program manager, and then it gets sent to you for you to make your updates to your budget and some other items we'll see. Eventually, all those updates are made, and everybody's happy with the way the contract looks, and then it gets sent for you to get signed. So at that point, all the changes are locked in the system, and you can sign your contract. You sign it electronically within our system, and then it gets sent to other designated people that need to sign it along the way, the state agency, the Attorney General's office, and the Controller's office. And then once it's signed by the Controller's office, the contract becomes an executed contract. And of course, we expect that to happen before your contract start date. Okay, so in the task of managing your project or your contract in the Grants Gateway, there will be two tasks required of you or somebody at your organization. The first is the contract information requested. That's where they all are now or will be soon. And that's the status where not everything is filled out and we need you to fill it out. So we need you to put in the budget and your address and some things like that. So that's what I'll be going over in the system in a few minutes. So in that case, the program manager, the contract manager, they've looked at your contract, they've done some initial entry, but they're giving it to you for you to fill it out and finalize it. And then again, another task you would receive is eventually when all that work has been done, it's time to sign. So you'll see it in that status called Grantee Contract Signature Required. In the contract, there's a couple sections you're going to need to work on. One is called the Program Information section. There's a question in there, your project title. There's contract information. But the biggest thing I have to work on is the second bullet here, the budget. And like I said, we'll be entering that in our test system in a few minutes. The work plan, you can actually ignore the work plan because, yeah, I mean, you'll look at it, but that will be filled out for you by your program manager. And the same thing with uploads. You don't really have to do anything with uploads. I don't think there's anything required. Eileen can jump in and fix that if that's not right. And then you'll be doing the previewing of your contract to make sure it looks good. So these really are the things you'll be doing during this contract information requested phase.
Jeff, about the uploads, each contract manager will contact their agency and let them know if there are additional documentations that will need to be uploaded to the grantee document folder, because they'll be different for each contract.
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So besides those tasks, what you really need to know is the grantee user roles. If you're new in the Grants Gateway and you were just awarded a contract, and even if your organization is new, you might not have everything and everybody set up yet, so that's important. So the grantee user roles will get you there. So first of all, when we set up your organization in the Grants Gateway, you send in your registration form, and we set you up with 2 users. Could be 1, but usually it's 2 users. And those people are the Grantee Delegated Administrators. That's this down here on the bottom left. Those people are the delegated admins. You can see they can add or edit user accounts, and they can manage pre-qualification. So pre-qualification is another part that we're not really covering here in this webinar, but that's making sure for not-for-profits that you fill out that document vault and you get it approved by someone at a state agency. So if you have questions about pre-qualification, hold them to the end, and I'll answer those. But the Grantee Delegated Administrator does pre-qualification and, that top bullet there, add or edit user accounts. So we leave it up to you, and particularly this person at your organization, to create any other accounts that you need in our system. So you're going to need somebody else in one of these roles. You might want somebody in the role of grantee up here in the top left, but that's not required because this person can edit the contract and application information. They could submit that information. They would receive emails from the system if there are updates to your contract, but one thing they can't do is sign the contract. So if you only have one person and that person fills out the contract and signs it, you're going to want somebody here on the right. But if you have maybe a grant writer or assistant or somebody that you are going to have fill out the details, but they won't actually sign the contract, then you might want to have two of these people. So you would have someone in the role of grantee, potentially, but you definitely need somebody in here on the right in either the Grantee Contract Signatory role or the Grantee System Administrator role. For the purposes of the grant, these people have exactly the same rights. They can work on the grant just like the grantee could. They can edit the application, put in the budget, put in some of the other details we need. They can save it, they can send it back to the program manager, and they can sign the contract. So both of these people here, the Grantee Contract Signatory and the Grantee System Admin, can sign the contract. So at the very minimum, you need somebody in one of these roles here on the right, the Contract Signatory or the System Administrator, and if you want, you could have somebody in the role of grantee working on the grant but not able to sign it. So I hope that's clear. Again, that's in the hands of the Grantee Delegated Admin for them to decide who gets what role. All right, so we'll go over to the next slide here, which is how to add users. So if you are the Grantee Delegated Admin, you would go to your organization information. You would click on a button called Organizations. You'd go to this first circle here where it says Organization Members. You'd click Add Members, and you would just and then you click New Member, and you would fill this out here, selecting the appropriate role. So in this case, you can see I picked somebody named James Smith. They're a program director, and I gave them the role of Grantee Contract Signatory. When you save that or you submit that, it sends that person two emails. One is their user ID, jsmith5 or something like that, and the other is their temporary password. They would log in with that password, change it, and be ready to work on the system. So that's in one of our manuals. That's in the user manual in the section covering users. So that's something that the Grantee Delegated Administrator would be working on. And perhaps this has already been done for you because you've been in the system for a while and you already have the users. Okay, again, I said that you're going to have tasks. So there are a couple of ways for you to locate tasks. Now, I'm actually going to skip this right now because this is what we call a non-competitive grant, meaning you didn't actually really apply for it in the Grants Gateway system. You were the first way this contract became about was that it was awarded to you in the Grants Gateway system. So with that being said, you wouldn't have tasks because you didn't apply. It doesn't know who to send the task to. So we're going to skip that and just show that you can actually search for your contract several ways. So even though it's a contract, which is right up here in the top middle there, you could search for it with applications as well, or as tasks. And if you did have a task for the specific contract, you'll see it down here in the bottom where it says Open Tasks. So what I'm going to do when I get into the system is show you how to do it by searching on the contract. And that's right here, this next slide, which is a search box that allows you to fill out any field. And if you're new to the system and you don't have any other contracts, you could leave everything blank and just hit the search button down there and find the contract or all contracts that we have. So you'll see me do that in the system in a few minutes as well. All right, there is something on the home page of your contract in the Grants Gateway called the Period Schedule Report. A lot of people don't really need to look at it, but I wanted to let you know what it is. What it is we schedule things. We give a certain number of days for different steps in the process to happen. And if we go over that, that affects the overall goal of getting your contract done and signed and ready to go prior to your start date. So you can monitor that by looking at that period schedule report and see where we are and how many days were allocated and how many days it actually took and are we ahead or behind that schedule. You know, our goal here is really to get your contract started on time, and we need everybody's help in doing that. We try to do it ourselves at the state agencies, and we need you guys to do it too. If you're stuck on something, give us a call. We don't want it to kind of linger and lose sight of that final goal there. All right, so if you were looking in that report, or you happen to log in and just look at the status of your contract, you would see it in these different statuses. I'm going to be going through many of them today, or most of them today when I go through this contract. But it starts out in Program Manager Review. It might get sent to you, which it will or it has, in that contract information requested. Eventually it'll go back to the Program Manager and then to the Contract Manager for them to also review and also make changes if they need to. There might be an internal review, which the Department of Health doesn't actually do that step in the system there. But then we go for signatures. We go to get you to sign it, the Grantee Contract Signature. Then we go to it goes to the status called Contract Manager Routing. That's a behind-the-scenes thing, but you might see that if you log in and look at your status. But then it goes to the Attorney General Office and to the OSC, to the State Comptroller's Office to get signed. So again, there's kind of half and half. You've got the development part of it, and you've got the signature part of it. So we'll be seeing that today. You would be going to grantgateway.ny.gov, and I'm going to type it just because I want to show you something here, grantgateway.ny.gov, and I hit enter. So I went to grantgateway.ny.gov, and it gives me this portal, and I can go to the portal, and this is where you could find grant opportunities to apply for. This is where you probably went to register your organization at one point. But this is also where the login page is. You can see I can log in up here. I wanted to point out, though, that a lot of people are in the habit of typing www before they go to a website. And if you were to do that here, you can see I get an error message, this site is not secure. And that's just the way the state sets up their secure websites. So I can see I can go to more information, and I can, even though it says not recommended, I could go to the web page, and it shows it in error as not secure. So don't go to the www version of the website. Just simply go to grantsgateway.ny.gov. That is the way the state sets up their secure websites, and you won't get that error because it does have a valid security certificate at this website. Okay, so you would click on login, and then you would log in with your username and password. Now, I'm not going to do it here. We have this testing system that I'm going to use, and I'm going to log in as someone named J. Grantee, hope I remember now, 1. Yep. So J. Grantee 1, I log in, and it asks me to change my password. So I'll do that. And I'll hit save. And I could save my password if I wanted to. And I can now click on home. So I'm at home, and I'm in the role of grantee, and I'm at the Grants Gateway main page. A couple things you might notice. It says there's some available opportunities. Based on the type of organization I am, I could click on View Opportunities and apply for another grant. We're not doing that here. My inbox, that is kind of a copy of all emails that you receive from the system, so really no reason for you to go there. It's just a duplicate of the emails. You can't actually do any work from there. But you can do work from tasks. You might remember I said My Tasks, and I could open tasks. And if I clicked on that Open Tasks, it's this Prevention for Long Island, PREVLI, it's my contract. So that's the contract we're talking about, and I received it today on 3/1, and I can work on it because it's in that status of contract info requested. So that was good. I had it as a task. But again, you may not get it as a task, and how do you deal with that? So what I wanted to point out is how to search for it up here in contracts. So the layout of the screen here, you can think of this top kind of grayish bar is searching. You're able to search the portal. You're able to search for applications or contracts that your organization might have. Once you get a contract, although it won't work with you guys, payments is something that certain programs are using in the system. Progress reports, again, something that certain programs are using but you won't be, or tasks. So you know I have a task because it was on my home page. But let's say we want to search by contracts. We can do that here, click on contracts, and I can search. Maybe I want to search. I know the word Long Island is in it. Let's find all contracts from my organization that have the word Long Island in the opportunity name. So I filled out Long Island, I hit search, and you can see, boom, I found the one we were just talking about, PREVLI, and you can see my contract number is 35678. So again, I could click on this application number and get into it. So I searched for the word Long Island. I could just leave that blank and hit search. Now I know this sample organization has 5 or 6 other samples in the system, so I came up with 7, but I could find the one from, again, this PREVLI and click on that to get into it. So many different ways of getting into it. I could go to the home page, look at my tasks. I could search on contracts. I could even search on applications, which looks the same, and I could even search on tasks. Maybe I know that the task is in someone's name, someone with the last name of Grantee, and I can hit search, and I do have to select the agency, Department of Health. So I say, I know someone whose last name is Grantee has a contract task to work on, and I click search, and find it. You can see down here I actually have 2, but the one we want to talk about is right here, that contract 35678. So again, there are several ways for you to find your contract. The easiest would be if you went to Home and you clicked on My Tasks, open the task, and click on it. But if you don't have the task, you can easily search for it under Contracts up here and even under Tasks if you would like. The black bar on top here is kind of reference. You've got training materials. There's some links to the manuals and videos. Organization is your organization, and you might remember in that PowerPoint slide that I could click on organizations and go and add new members and things like that. Profile, that's your personal profile. That's where you first set up your password. Maybe you need to change your password or your phone number has changed or something. And then log out obviously would log you out. And finally, as far as navigation goes, this blue bar has kind of action buttons. So there's a help button here. Sometimes there's some help related to the page that you're on, but there's a save button. Whenever you're on a page that you are allowed to make changes to, the save button will appear. So I could change my profile and hit save, and it would update it for me. But I have nothing to save there, and I'm going to go back to Home and back to that task and work on my contract. So I go to My Tasks, and I'll click on my contract. Not my organization name, but the contract number or the application number in this case. Okay, so you click on it and you're now on the contract main page, logged in as the role of grantee. So you can see there's a couple other options here now. We've got these green buttons. Menu brings us back to where we are, this main page of the contract. Forms menu is where all the work we're going to be doing is. Status changes, eventually I can submit this back to my program manager, and you can see I would click that status. Management tools, you could check for errors here, and you could add people. And I'll do that as we go through here so I can add my signatory to it. And then you can ignore progress reports and related documents. All right, so like I said, the forms menu is where we're going to be working the most. Now I have been awarded $115,000. That's what my period total adds up to. My contract is from 7/1/2018 to 6/30/2019, so that's 12 full months. Now, again, we want to get these things signed before 7/1, so that gives us 4 months. 3 months is probably adequate for getting contracts done, so we've got a little extra buffer in there. But again, if somebody, delays the process, that kind of affects the whole time of delivery there. So we just want to be aware of, doing things in a timely manner. All right. So I do want to do work in the forms menu. You'll notice I can hover over it and see the menu, but you might prefer to just click on it and see the whole forms menu, which is what I did. And you can see a couple things here. First of all, contract document properties. Now, there's really no reason for you to look at it because when you preview your contract, which you'll do in a little while, it'll show you the same information. But this just shows you a breakdown of the different documents that make up your contract. So there is besides the master contract, there is the attachment A1. That's the program-specific terms and conditions. That starts on about page 30 of your contract. And we'll look at that when I preview my contract. There's the budget, the work plan, the payment reporting schedule. And then there are any additional contract documents that the state agency added. And you can see the AIDS Institute has two documents, the attachment E1, which is the policy on personal health information, and attachment M, which is a MWBE document. All right, so that'll become part of your contract, and we'll look at those as we look at our contract as a whole. So that was Forms menu, Contract Document Properties. So now if I look at the rest of the Forms menu, we can see application information. Well, we didn't apply. This wasn't an application, so we don't have an application to print. We don't have an RFP to really look at, and we don't have any application versions to look at. So what we need to work on starts here in Program Information. And you'll notice there's a red hand there, and if I scroll through, there's one other red hand, and that's Expenditure Summary. Those are items that definitely require someone's attention. They're items that you're going to need to fill out. But in fact, you're going to need to fill out everything here in Program Information. You're going to need to fill out the details of your budget. You don't need to fill out the work plan. The grantee document folder, that's what Eileen told you before. We'll look at that. And then we're going to want to preview your contract as we go through. So let's start here with contract information. So when we look at our contract, you'll see that there are three addresses that it shows on the first page. Your primary mailing address, your contract payment address, and your contract mailing address. They're usually the same, but if your organization has different addresses for different items, you might want to go and change them. And there would be a drop-down here if I had multiple addresses that I could change it to. You can see in my case, I don't have multiple addresses, but you do have to hit save. Notice the error message says, please review and save this page for accuracy. So I'll hit save, and that error has gone away. It's now a green light. And what I've done is I've locked in those three addresses to be shown on my contract. So remember that when we look at our contract, we'll remember those addresses at 110 State Street. All right, that's easy enough. Now the next one is your project site address. That's different, it could be different than your main addresses that we just saw. So if I go to project site addresses, it's asking me for the name and description of the facility or the project. So we'll just call this Jeff's office. And then we want your address. So again, it very well may be the same address we just saw. Regardless, you still have to type something here. This will not end up on the contract, but it is just a required portion of the Forms menu. So I'll just say that I'm at 123 Main Street in Albany. And you can see there's two items down here, Regional Council and Agency-Specific Region. Neither of these are required for you, so don't worry about it. If you wanted to know what Regional Council was, it's the state regional economic councils, and sometimes we use those for reporting purposes, but the AIDS Institute does not require you to pick anything here. So you could pick NA if you want, or just leave it blank. System will accept both. So if I hit save, it's now saved that and gives me that green light. So let's go back to the Forms menu. A couple things you'll notice. Anything that you've saved something on, it shows this little icon. So from a blank page to a filled out page, basically. I know that I've done something. And we know I did it, Jeff Grantee, at 10:34 and 28 seconds. That's when I saved it. So as you go through here, you'll see certain things and timestamps of when things are saved. All right, so we do have this program-specific questions section. We'll click on that. And really what this is you have to give your project a title. Now, in a competitive application, if you were applying for a grant, you'd have a whole bunch of questions here to answer. You can see we don't have any questions. It says NA. But you do have to give your project title. And Eileen, I'm sorry, jump in if so you can answer this, please. Do they have to fill it out? Will you fill it out for them? Do you have specific text they need to fill out?
Hi, Jeff. The individual contract managers will let the grantees know what the project title is. They're all working on it right now. And as soon as they have a project title, we'll let the grantees know, and then they can fill it in.
So my project title, Long Island Prevention Services. Now, services, and hit save. Now that's important. We do want to get it right. So your program manager will tell you what to put in there. And you'll see why that makes a difference going forward when I look at my contract. So remember that project title was here in the Forms menu in this first section. All right, so we're done with this section here. Now we need to go on the budget, and this is where you're going to spend probably most of your time. And if you remember, I was awarded $115,000, I think. So my expenditure summary has an error. Why? Because that's a summary showing how my budget adds up. And if I click on it, what it's saying is, well, let's read the error message. Expenditure summary cannot be zero. The grant funds total does not match the current period total amount. That's because my budget adds up to zero, yet I was awarded $115,000. So I need to fill out portions of these categories: salary, fringe, travel, equipment, other, whatever it happens to be, so that they add up to $115,000. The system will never let you send it back to us, back to your program manager, unless your budget adds up to $115,000. So how do we do that? We'll go back to the Forms menu, and we'll go to those different sections. So let's say I have salary. I'll go to Personal Services Salary, and I'll put in a couple people's positions. So I've clicked on Salary. I scroll down, and I can see I've got a position title, role responsibility, number of people in the title, what is their annualized salary, because you might not pay their full salary from this grant. How many hours do they work a week? How much is the grant funding of their work? How many months are they being funded for? And how much money are you asking for the grant to cover? So let's say I have the grant administration. And you may be instructed to put in the person's name. You know, it's good to have the position and maybe even the name in some cases. So I'll just call this Sally Jones. And role responsibility, now this will not show up on the contract, but it is, as you can see by the red asterisk, anything with a red asterisk is a required field. So you could put a little more detail in here. This is what Sally does. You would be a little more descriptive than that. Your project manager might give you some guidance on that. And there's one person here that's doing this. And let's say her position is $75,000. That's how much she makes a year. Let's say she works 40 hours a week, and she's funded 50%. And number of months funded is how many months, how many months out of this, the whole year she's being funded, and of course it's 12 months. And then so half of, oops, I did 5%, 50%, half of $75,000 is $37,500. So we do $37,500, and I'll hit save. I've now added someone with the grant funds of $37,500 to my budget. So that goes obviously towards that $110,000. All right, so I'm sure you'll have more than one person. So once I save somebody, you can see in the blue bar, I now have the save button, but also add or delete. So if I click on add, I get a blank salary page, and I can add a second person. So let's go here, and let's say community health specialist. Now again, I'm just making these up. These are not obviously the direct amounts and positions that you'll be using. You know, you guys should know what you have, or your program manager will give you guidance on what you need. This is me just showing you how to do it, not the details of what you really need to do. So let's just say this is Smith, and here is the responsibility. One person, and let's say their salary is $35,000, and again, 40-hour week. They're funded by, let's say, 50% for 12 months, and if you do the math, that's going to be $17,500. And I'll hit save. Okay, so now I've got two people, and you can see there's a drop-down allowing me to toggle between that list of people. All right, let's add one more person here. I'll click on add. And let's say this is care manager supervisor. And we'll say managing care. And let's say she makes $40,000 a year. And again, 40 hours for 50%. I'm using 50% just because it makes the math easier. You're not going to be that lucky in a lot of cases. So obviously there's some math required in here. The system will not do the math for you. So it's probably a good idea to do it on a spreadsheet and double check it. And I'll show you how you can double check that in a few minutes. So if she's 50% of 40,000, she's 20,000. And I'll hit save. Okay, so I'm not going to have enough to fill out $110,000. I don't want to put in a whole bunch of people. So I'm going to put in kind of a lump sum of people at the end when I figure out how much more I need. Obviously, you wouldn't do that. But let's go back to the forms menu and see what we have. So we know that we've got 3 people we've entered in salary. I could hover over it and click on them individually if I wanted to. And we've got these other categories to fill out. But notice you also have a narrative. And Eileen, jump in what you want in here. But typically, the state agency wants you to fill out kind of, information about how you came to those people and those numbers and everything like that. This says provide an explanation of any exceptions in staffing patterns and or salary costs. But usually it's more describe why you have these people, what they're doing. Eileen, do you have anything to add?
It's the position description that we would normally put on, we used to have an additional budget page that would have position descriptions for everyone that's on the contract. We would like to see that in the justification line. And then if you need more room, then you would use the salary narrative. Gotcha. Or I did notice that a couple of grantees have used that space to put, let's say there's a position that wasn't filled and they have knowledge that they'll be filling it in 3 months, or they have knowledge that there's a little bit of a cost savings. So they'll put some information in that narrative to just give us an indication of what's happening with salaries and positions over the course of the year.
Yep. And maybe somebody's salary changes halfway through the year or something, you can explain that. Or
yes, they can note that right there.
They're going to be on maternity leave, so they're only going to be working 6 months or something. Yep. Okay, so we fill that out and I hit save. So I've done 3 entries in salary, I've done the narrative, and let's go back to the forms menu and do fringe. So again, you're going to have to check with your program manager kind of the details of how you want to explain it here in fringe. So I'm just going to lump it all together. Eileen, feel free to jump in. So I'm just going to say here is the fringe details. And here, and let's say mine is $25,000.
So typically what we say on that first line where it says fringe type description, we say fringe rate, dash, and the rate that we're requesting. So if it's 45%, we might put that in there. Then on the justification line, we kind of like to see if you have knowledge of what's included in that fringe rate. So does it include retirement? Does it include health benefits? Does it include FICA? Does it include unemployment? Any of those things that are put into your fringe can be just listed just like Jeff is doing right there.
Okay, thank you. So I'll hit save there. You'll notice when we look at our contract, it won't actually show those details of it, but DOH just does need to have it in the back end there. All right, back to our forms menu. There's also a fringe narrative you can fill out similarly like we did with our salary narrative. If you have to explain or expand upon that some more. And I'll hit save there. All right, so I'm not yet close to my $110,000. You probably have your budget in mind and you're just filling it out. Let's say I've got a couple other items here. Let's say I have mileage. So where would that go? That's going to go under travel. So I'll go to travel here. And I'll say staff travel mileage at 54 cents per mile. Here is the justification. And let's say this is around $4,000. I'm using round numbers just to add it up easily. Yours will not be round numbers, I imagine. All right, and let's say I have one other item here. Remember, once you put one item in for a category, you can click on Add here in the top and add a second category. And let's just call this in-state conferences. And that's $1,000. All right. And I'll do one other category here. I'll go back to the Forms menu. I probably should explain the travel and the travel narrative. So you would go there and enter that out. And we'll go to operating expenses. And maybe we'll have all right, so I've got telecommunications. Let's call that $5,000, and I'll hit save. And I'll add one more item. So remember the add button. And we'll say I have program supplies. And I'll say that's $2,000. So again, I'm just throwing out numbers, throwing out items. These may or may not be similar to something you're going to be doing. You should be filling out the justification on anything, the narrative on anything that needs explaining. And I'm working towards my final number, which is $110,000, and I haven't met that yet. If I go to my expenditure summary, you can see that, or $115,000, you can see I'm $3,000 off. So I'll add one more person at $3,000. You're not going to be doing it that way. You've got your number in mind, and you have your positions in mind, I imagine. So I'll go to salary and add somebody else for $3,000. All right, so I'll click Add. And I'll say Program Assistant. Maybe the name again. One person. Let's say, you know, let's say it's $30,000, just so I can get an easy amount. And they're funded by 10% for 12 months, so that's $3,000. Okay? So I'll hit Save. So remember before I said in your, you're going to want to double check things in kind of an Excel spreadsheet. Well, you can do that here. In the bottom of every category, you've got Category Total Summary. If I click on that, it'll allow me to download and open an Excel spreadsheet. And I'll just zoom in a little bit. That shows the details of what we just did. There are those titles. This is responsibility, the number, the salary, and how much we're asking for in the grant. So you can kind of do your math here. If you've got a big, long list of people, you can double check, and you can say, oh, wait a minute, I forgot this fifth person. So it's a good way of just double checking your work, both in the math part of it and just the amount of people and spelling and names and everything. So you can see right here, I wrote here is the, oh, I just cut it off, that's all. But if it was cut off or something, you'd know that as well. All right, so that's the, don't save that, and that's the category total summary. So if my math is right, if I go up to Forms menu and back down to my expenditure summary, you'll notice that error is gone. Why? Because my budget adds up now to $115,000 where it didn't before. So the period total is how much I was awarded for the period. $115,000 here in the total is what my personal services and non-personal services add up to. $103,000 plus $12,000. So I've satisfied everything I needed to do with the budget. Again, if you didn't have their budget filled out properly and you still had a red error message on that summary, it's not going to let you send it back to us or back to the program manager. If you're stuck on it, though, you can certainly call the program manager. They could actually log in and fix it for you while you're on the phone if they wanted to. You wouldn't have to send it back and forth. But eventually, obviously, it has to be no errors on that before you can send it back to us in the system. All right, so we did the program information. We did the budget. The work plan has been done for us before, and you can see Maria was my program manager, and she, today, filled out the work plan overview form in the objectives, tasks, and performance measures. We'll take a look at those in our preview of our contract. The last thing I wanted to point out here was the grantee document folder. And if you look at it, you'll see it's empty. But your program manager may ask you to provide them with documents. So maybe it's something for insurance or some program files you need to include. So you can go here and attach it. I'll just say this is my sample attachment. And I'll go find something to attach. And I can even explain it. Here is an explanation of what it is. And then hit save. So what I've done is I've uploaded a document. I can double check the document that I uploaded here by clicking on View File. And my program manager can now come into the system and view that document, and it kind of stays in my contract for as long as we want it to. So I could click on Add and add another one if I wanted to. I could have a list of different documents here that would just be a drop-down for us to select from. That's the grantee document folder, and it's a way for you to share documents with us. They don't automatically become part of the contract, but they're part of what we need related to working on the contract. All right, so I've done everything that I need to do here, and I want to look at my contract. Before I send it back, I really should look at it and to see what it looks like and kind of, what the details are. And that's down here on Contract Preview. Later on, I could click on Contract Versions and actually download the signed version of it, but until we get to the signature statuses, I can only click on Preview. So I click on Contract Preview, it'll open it in a new window or new tab, and it might take a minute or two because at this moment it's building the contract PDF from all those details we just saw. Okay, so it wants me to open up this PDF, which I will do, and here it is. So you can see it's a 68-page document. Remember my contract number was 35678, that's right there. So the whole contract number is DOH01 because it's Department of Health, C35678GG, and this 3450000. It is a fixed term agreement for 1 year. This is the name of my organization. It's a new contract. And remember that project name. Back to one of the first things I did, let me just double check and show you where it comes from. Back in the Forms menu, back on Program Specific Questions is where we filled out our project name, our project title right here, Long Island Prevention Services. And if I go back to my PDF, that's where that came from. So that's where that comes from. That's why it's important to get it right. You've got your vendor ID number, your tax ID number. I'm a not-for-profit. And you can see my addresses. Remember those 3 addresses I verified? Well, here they are. There's that 110 State Street. Since they're the same for all 3, they're just checked. If your addresses were different for different ones, they won't be checked. Now, really, most of you, or all of you, your contracts are not going to be mailed because they're going to be done in the system. So nothing's going to be mailed to you anyway, and your payments are probably going to be electronic anyway, but we do need those addresses, obviously, to be right. Now, I noticed one problem here, and it's just because we're in the sample system, but I don't have my charity's registration number here or an exemption code. So you have to make sure your charity's registration number is there. If it isn't, that's something you need to fix in your organization page. Your program manager will hopefully be looking at that as well and would notice it if it wasn't there. Page 2, is your terms and, the contract duration or term and period and the amount. So you can see, again, 7/1/2018 to 6/30/2019, that's 1 year for $115,000. If it was a multi-year contract, we'd have the different years down here, but this is not. And then this next page, the third page, is kind of a table of contents saying what's included in this package. So the attachment A1 is the program terms and conditions. We'll see that. B1 is my budget. We had an expenditure type of budget, not one of these other types. Attachment C is the work plan. Attachment D is your payment and reporting schedule. And then remember, we had two other attachments, the E1 and the attachment M. They're all part of this 68-page document here. All right. Page 4 is the signature page. Once we go through signatures, those names will be stamped here on this page. Obviously, there's nothing here now. So it's not a, a cursive signature or anything like that. It's the system stamping it in. And then the state terms and conditions starts on page 5. So that's a 25-page section. You certainly should read it, but I'm going to skip through it and go to page 30. And that's the attachment A1. So this is the state or the agency terms and conditions. So this is, I think it's usually 7 pages. Yep, 7 pages. So I'm going to skip through there and go to page 37. You should not skip it. You should read it. There's another part of it there too, attachment A1 part B, so that's another 3 pages. Now we get into our budget. So on page 40 here is our budget. So this will be the same for all of you. Your first 4 pages, the state terms and conditions starts on page 5. Your budget will start on page 40. All right, there's that overview, and there are the different categories. So here's salary, and those 4 people I entered for $103,000. I didn't have anything for contractual. I had 2 things for travel for $5,000. I had nothing for equipment, space, property, rent, or own. You might have some of that. Utilities, I didn't have any of that. I had some telecommunications. Maybe that goes under utilities. I had the program supplies for $7,000, and that was the total of my budget. Okay, so that was our budget, just as we saw in our forms menu. And then the work plan. So we didn't look at the work plan before because it's going to be done for you, but the work plan includes a summary. So that's this section right here, which is, I only wrote 1 paragraph, but it could be several paragraphs. It's, up to 50,000 characters long. So it could be a lot of details about what you're doing. And then the work plan objectives, tasks, and performance measures. Objectives are kind of the high-level goals. Tasks are the milestones to go along those goals. So you'll have an objective, 1 or many objectives. You can have 1 or many tasks. And you can have 1 or many performance measures for each task. So in this case, I have 1 performance measure and a second performance measure. So yours obviously will be a little more detailed than that, but it'll be done for you by your program manager. All right. Next is attachment D. This is the payment and reporting schedule. You might remember I mentioned that you have a 25% advance. So this is a requested advance. You would have to request to get paid that amount up front. So the rest of this is for if it was a scheduled advance, which it is not. All right, your claims are due monthly, 30 days after the end of the month. So this other information on this page does not apply to you. There are some reports that are due. There's a final report that is due, which is 60 days after the end of the contract period. So 60 days after July 2019. And then there's some other reports too. We have this schedule here on page 55. These are program monthly reports that are due 30 days after the end of the reporting period. So you can see for the month of July, it's due on August 31st. Month of August, it's due on September 30th, and so on. All right, and then we get to those 2 attachments that we talked about. The attachment E1, the AIDS Institute Policy on Personal Health Related Information. And there's actually sample forms here that can be used. These are release forms. And finally, here on page 65 is attachment M, the MWBE, Minority Women Business Entity document. So these are all documents. Obviously, I'm not going to read them here for you, but you do need to read and understand. And they're all there in that package. They're all there when you click on that contract preview. So again, just to wrap up one more time, I logged in. I searched for my contract either in my tasks, on the home page, or I searched through the contracts. I clicked on my contract to access it, and I went to the Forms menu, and I filled out what was required of me, the program information, the budget. I added anything if I needed to the Grantee document folder, and then I did a preview of my contract. I'm happy with how it looks. If I wasn't, I could talk to the contract manager, or we can go back and forth on some questions, and I can now submit it to them. One last thing, though, before I submit it, is adding the people. If the person in my organization that should have it as a task doesn't, we can add them if we wanted to. Now, they could just go in here and search on contracts and find it, but if I wanted to add them, let's say I have a user here, her name is Barbara Signatory, and I want to add Barbara, so I can go to Management Tools and Add Edit People. Now, if I do this and find her name, you can see she's not checked. If I check her name and hit Save, Barbara is now tied to this application or this contract, and when it comes back and forth from the state, she will get the task, and she'll also get an email about it. All right? So I didn't have to do that. Again, that was Management Tools, Add Edit People, and check her name. I didn't have to do that. It just makes it easier. Now it's going to appear on her home page instead of her having to go to contracts and search for it. Okay, so I'm done with this, and I want to send it back to my program manager. That's under Status Changes and Contract Information Submitted. So I click on that. Whenever you click on one of those status changes, please let it refresh. I think a lot of people end up trying to click somewhere else while it's processing, and things could get hung up in the process or in the middle. So make sure when you click on a status change that you actually wait for the page to refresh. So what did that do? It moved it from Contract Information Requested back to my program manager, and she now has it to work on. So it's in Program Manager Review. So that means I can't make any changes. But if I go in and I say, oh, wait a minute, I forgot, I needed some details about this travel. And I go in here, doesn't really matter what I do. I can type whatever I want here. Doesn't matter because there's no Save button. So if I wanted to make more changes, I'd have to ask for the program manager to send it back to me. But in my case, I don't want to. I'm fine, and I'm going to have the program manager do what she needs to do and send it through for signatures. So I bet you in a minute I'll get a pop-up about my email saying I have a new task in the Grants Gateway. All right? So, and maybe your contract manager calls you and tells you that as well. So I'm going to log in as Barbara Signatory. Actually, I'm going to log in as Jeff Grantee first. Because I want to show you that the roles are important. Remember that grantee, he might have the task, which he does, but he's not going to be able to sign it. If I go to Open Tasks, and there it is, that Grantee Contract Signature Required, and I click on the contract, I don't have any options to save it, to sign it. That would be under Status Change, and you see there's no possible statuses. Why? Because I'm in the role of grantee, and a grantee can't sign a contract. So let's log in as Barbara instead, and she should be able to sign it. So I go here. Again, I could search under contracts if I wanted to. However, I have a task, and I'll click on it, and you'll notice that Barbara can actually sign it. That's an option here under Status Changes. So she could have worked on it, and the grantee worked on it, but only Barbara, in this case, can sign it. So you might want to look at it one more time before you sign it. You can go to Forms menu. You could do the contract preview if you wanted to, but now there's contract versions in there. So I click on contract versions. It saves the PDF of every status or every stage of signatures. So right now this is the unsigned version. I'm not going to bother looking at it because it looks like just what we saw, but in a minute, once I sign it, I'll go and look at the signed version. All right, so how do I sign it? Status change, and you pick the status of Grantee Contract Signature Complete. So I can't send it to new period, that's just not an option. I can't send it to modification, it'll give me an error. I could send it back to the contract manager though. Maybe I got it to sign, but I look at it and I see, oh, this is really wrong, or this has changed, or something needs to be fixed. Remember, I can't make any changes now because everything's been locked. So what I'll do is I'll send it to contract manager review, they can make the changes, and then send it back to me to get signed. But in our case, we don't need to do that, we're happy with it, and we're just going to sign it. So Grantee Contract Signature Complete. So again, I hovered over status changes. You don't have to hover, you can click it as well, and there's click the button, Apply Status. So if you're signing a contract, you have to agree to this kind of terms and conditions here, basically saying that I am who I say I am, I'm allowed to sign on behalf of my organization, I haven't given my password to somebody else. Obviously this is a secure website, and I click on I agree, and it's now going to sign that contract with my name. Again, no cursive signature or anything like that, it'll just be my name stamped on it with a date stamp as well. So we're letting it go, we let it refresh, it's refreshed the page, and I can now go to Forms menu and down to the bottom here to Contract Versions and see, look, Barbara Signatory signed one other part. So here's the signed part by Barbara. If I click on it, this is the contract PDF. It's going to look exactly like what we just saw, except on page 4 is going to have Barbara's signature right down here, and her title and the date. All right? Now remember, the flaw that I had here before was it didn't have my charity's registration number. So we should have fixed that before we did this. That was here on page 1. Down here, that should have been fixed before it was actually signed, but in the test system, we didn't really care about that. All right, and now what's going to happen is going to go through these other statuses. The agency is going to sign it, the Attorney General is going to sign it, and the State Comptroller's Office is going to sign it, and then we'll have an executed contract. And if I went back to menu on the home page, and we can see the details, I can see it's now in this status called Contract Package Validation. That's an internal status that the contract manager is doing. But if you wanted to remember that status report, or the schedule, that's that period schedule report. And this is the last thing I'm going to show you. If you click on that from the home page of your contract, you might remember this from that PowerPoint, just showing us the different statuses of contract development here and then contract approval. So obviously all these days that were allocated, it took me 0 days to do it. That's obviously not going to happen in reality, but we can see where it is now and where it's going to go next. So they've put in for 136 total days of schedule, and right now we've taken 0.